Courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 515. I am Andrew in our forum, Andrew NLSC on X. With me as always, my co-host Derek, D3 in our forum, and D3G and D384 on X. Derek, lots to talk about this week, but what's new with you?
TVCINR, Andrew. That virtual currency is not real, at least according to Take-Two's lawyers.
Yeah, last week we talked about the changes in the terms of service, the new TOS BS, as we called the episode, and called back to the lawsuit that was filed late last year, November, if I recall. And Take-Two has responded by saying that VC is not plaintiff's property. Instead, in-game VC are, quote, fictions created by game publishers subject to the publisher's terms of service and user agreements. So virtual currency isn't real currency, Derek, which the name virtual would imply, I suppose, except that it can be bought with real currency. So, more scumminess, basically.
The money used to buy that virtual currency was most definitely real.
Yeah.
And you can ask all the consumers who paid for the quote-unquote fiction currency. I think it's just on brand for Take-Two. I think that's not a surprising defense. And apparently, it's in the game's EULA, so the end-user license agreement. So they were prepared, and they've probably been prepared for years for a complaint like this. And I'm sure it's been in multiple games in the past. I hope this doesn't hold up in court. I hope that defense doesn't get the case thrown out of court. I hope that the court still sees the case. But, because they were prepared, because technically it's in the EULA, I'm a little worried that case could be thrown out.
It does seem to be something they've done to protect themselves, obviously, and this is what corporations do. They get their lawyers to draft up these agreements that are definitely in their favor. That is no secret. And it brings to mind things like EA Sports calling loot boxes surprise mechanics, these weasel words, these corporate buzzwords that justify legally and attempt to morally justify really shady practices. And it is endemic of the gaming industry these days. It's not just 2K. 2K are, or Take-Two I should say, the company that we're dealing with because we are basketball gamers. This is a basketball gaming website and podcast. So that is the company that we're concerned about at the moment. And yeah, it's very on brand for Take-Two.
You know what's very real, Andrew? The grind that they force on the user that makes them want to buy the fake currency, right? With their real money. What's very real is how crappy they make your player out of the gate when you try to play online, and that pressure that they put on you in order for you to use your real money to buy the fake money, the fake virtual money, in order to even enjoy their game. I think it's just a ridiculous defense, and I really, really hope it doesn't hold up in court.
I do have my doubts, unfortunately, because, it is in the EULA, as you said, and it states the company may, quote, eliminate virtual currency as and when it wishes.
I just want to point that out. They put so much behind a paywall in that game. They did put an intentional grind in the game. They give you so many duplicates in My Team. They put all of the pressure on you to buy more packs in order to get good players. They took control of the auction house in, the whole market in My Team. They make your players suck out of the gate in order to pressure you into, spending more money on the game. And it's just slimy behavior. I'm sorry. I don't know any other way to put it. It's slimy, scummy behavior by Take-Two.
Absolutely warranted word for it, I would say. And it goes to show once again that they are designing the game to be weaker, to push you towards the recurrent revenue mechanics. It's not about making the game as fun as possible and, we're throwing in a shortcut and a way for us to make extra money if you want. They are, as we've said before, optional technically, but realistically, feasibly, a lot of people are going to pay, and a lot of people do pay. They are making billions in recurrent revenue. They make more from VC sales than sales of the game. We've mentioned that before. Those figures are out there. So, yeah, slimy is absolutely a warranted word for it. It is on brand, unfortunately. And, yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. Hopefully it does make an impact. Hopefully it at least gets people to wake up to, oh, this is not just something they're doing for our convenience. They're not putting this in there for our benefit, microtransactions. You still see some people trying to argue that. And they can, when they're making the game less fun in order to facilitate recurrent revenue, that's not for us. It's not for us at all.
Like I said, I will not be putting on NBA 2K24 again.
Yeah.
Point blank. It's done. I'm done with it. And I have plenty of other games to play. On that note, Andrew, something else provoked an emotional reaction from you. And I found this funny because it involves your favorite series of video games of all time, NBA Jam. Maz, a friend of the NLSC, been an NLC member for a long time, stated on the Discord, unpopular opinion, NBA Street Volume 2 is better than any NBA Jam. Better roster, better music, better controls, better courts and arenas, and the one that grinded your gear a little bit, Andrew, and better announcer. Now, you are the biggest Tim Kitzrow fan.
Absolutely.
And like I said, I know about your love for NBA Jam. How much of that statement from Maz do you agree with?
None of it. But, you know, she's entitled to her opinion, as everyone is, and I do know that other people are in favour of Street over Jam. I know that Lady Culture, Jacqueline, has also mentioned preferring Street over Jam in general. And I guess Jam is the game that got me into basketball gaming. Jam and Live 95. Jam Tournament Edition and Live 95, that is. And to me, you don't have Street without Jam, because Jam established so many staples of the arcade genre and how to do them right. We've talked about Jam compared to NBA Playgrounds, how NBA Playgrounds feels like a poor man's Jam. It doesn't have the right pace, it doesn't have the right mechanics, feels like it's mixed in some sim mechanics, and not in a sim arcade hybrid way like a NBA in the Zone, but more a we don't really know how to make an arcade game properly kind of way, with all due respect to Saber Interactive and the people working on that game. Jam, I just prefer that style. I've never been hugely into Street Ball. Certainly did enjoy the mixtape tour back in the day, but I've always liked that NBA aesthetic, liked Catching Fire more so than Game Breakers, the over-the-top dunks, and I don't even know who the announcer in Street Volume 2 is. I know it was, the first NBA Street was Bob Elliott as Joe the Show Jackson. He was playing a character. But, no, I'm sorry, Tim Kitzrow is the man.
So I looked this up, Andrew. So the announcer for NBA Street Volume 2, NBA Street V3, and NBA Street Showdown is Bobito Garcia, a.k.a. DJ Cucumber Slice, and a.k.a. Cool Bob Love. I didn't know that, so I just learned something. But I think that he does an exceptional job in that game. And I think that the on-court hype man in And One Street Ball also does a hell of a job, right? And I think that they keep the action exciting. I think it like their style is really good for the street game. I've said my piece recently on which gameplay I like better, and I think that overall, I prefer NBA Street Volume 2 gameplay, even over NBA Jam on Fire Edition. But I love both games, right?
Sure.
And go either way. I've played both of them a ton. I've connected with you on both of them. And I think that they are both the two of the strongest, if not the strongest, arcade basketball video games ever made. And NBA Street Volume 2 is arcade, people. It is a street game, but it's also arcade. You're jumping with your feet at the rim.
Exactly, yeah. And it is definitely taking that more cartoonish in a good way approach to basketball gaming. Now, I mean, if people want to argue in favor of the Street series, then they are certainly entitled to their opinion. And Street Volume 2 is a strong contender for one of the best basketball games ever made. also has Michael Jordan in it, which no jam has outside of modding, obviously. I just think that On Fire is a better power-up than Game Breaker. I like the ridiculous dunks a bit more than the dribble moves. That does give you a bit more to do, having those dribble moves in Street, I agree. But, I mean, as for the announcer, that is the one thing that I will absolutely dispute, because from a pop culture standpoint, he's on fire. Tim Kitzrow, and they're the one. He's the one that they're bringing in to call games and to do voiceovers for highlights. The teams are actually bringing him in for NBA Jam Night and to do voiceovers on their highlight reels. No one's calling in the street announcers. I'm sorry.
Here's the deal. I love both of them. Right? I think they both add to the immersion of the game. I think both of them are excellent. I think Tim Kitzrow is more iconic. Right? I think that Tim Kitzrow is just unbelievably creative on the mic, and I think he is the voice for basketball arcade games. I agree. I think that Road Trip is superior to anything NBA Street Volume 2 has to offer depth-wise, and I obviously love the extra added NBA touch. We talked about it on a previous show. We're both NBA fans for life. That's, when we first really got into basketball, it was because of the NBA, right? And, with the NBA Jam games, you get the real courts and more of that NBA atmosphere as opposed to, always playing on the blacktop. So there are definitely advantages in those areas for NBA Jam, but I absolutely love just all the things that you can do on Street Volume 2 with the dribble, with the throwing it off the backboard to yourself, right? Throwing it off the backboard alley-oop to your teammate, trapping shots off of the glass. I just think that there's a lot more you can do strategically and just overall on the controls on NBA Street Volume 2 over any NBA Jam game. However, for pick up and play, fast-paced action, for the co-op feel, like I think from a co-op perspective, because it's always 2-on-2, NBA Jam just flows so nicely. I think that NBA Jam on Fire Edition is just one hell of a basketball video game.
I mean, that's fair. You do have deeper controls, a bit more strategy in that regard with Street, and also having those locations, those famous street ball locations, and even Street Home Court, a game that I, as I've said before, believe I like a little bit more than you do, even with its sepia tone, Derek, the controversy of the sepia tone. The fact that you are looking at these players' home courts and these famous street ball courts around the United States is a fun gimmick that NBA Jam doesn't have. You just have those stylized NBA arenas in the NBA Jam style. But the thing that separates NBA Jam, especially when On Fire Edition came out, for me, the road trip, obviously, because you have the depth of that mode, the best campaign mode in any arcade basketball game, I would say, but also the real AI, the ability to record your strategies and throw them back in your face, change things up. A lot of arcade games, including the earlier NBA Jam games, really we kind of got a bit repetitive as far as, okay, this is a winning strategy, knock them down, do the crossover, do the move, go up, score, rinse and repeat, etc. So I do think that On Fire Edition really changed things up. You can feel a difference with the real AI, how it throws those strategies back in your face, how it anticipates them. It really did change the game.
Because of all the different challenges in NBA Jam On Fire Edition, the different difficulty levels and how ramped up the difficulty can get, I think that, oftentimes NBA Jam On Fire Edition can actually be more challenging than NBA Street Volume 2. And because of the Mini-Men challenge and, the dunk is worth like 3 or 4 points and the three-pointer is only worth 1, those types of challenges and everything, it keeps the game even more fresh than NBA Street Volume 2. You actually have, because of that depth and because of the variety and everything, you can put a lot more hours into NBA Jam On Fire Edition. So I definitely agree that it wins in the depth and possibly the difficulty.
It evolves. The gameplay evolves with that real AI, borrowed from the Fight Night series. So that was very cool. But I should mention that I still do love the Street series as well. I think you absolutely need both. They both bring something different to the table in that arcade basketball gaming space. I just think sometimes the Jam gets a little bit, and as weird as it sounds, it's like calling Michael Jordan underrated, right? I do, although some people certainly do underrate his airness when they're talking about plumbers and dentists and Ball DeRozan and whatnot. Don't need to get into all that again. But I do feel that sometimes Jam is overlooked, underappreciated, underrated, because of Street being such a great series and doing its own thing so well. You know, without, as I said, without Jam, you don't have Street.
Now for the music in NBA Jam on Fire Edition is unique to NBA Jam, right? Like, it's not a soundtrack of, real songs.
Original score, yeah.
Exactly. So there's definitely a different dynamic in relation to the soundtrack in both games. To be honest with you, I don't prefer one over the other. How exciting is it when you put on NBA Jam on Fire Edition, when it opens up with the power chords and it's, the NBA Jam logo, the ball on fire, fat flashes in your face and all of that stuff. It's super exciting and gets you pumped up to start your session on that game.
This game is on fire!
And in a way, NBA Street Volume 2, it's a little bit more chill, right?
But I like that. I like that too.
So I think it's the best of both worlds with those games, and I like both soundtracks.
Speaking of soundtracks and arcade basketball games, Just Blaze, who also contributed a track to Life 2003, the soundtrack that went platinum, of course, the first video game soundtrack to do so, also did the music for NBA Ballers Chosen One, a game that I've been playing a little bit of recently. It was one of my recent dip into the collection to play an underplayed game from last week. And, that is a very interesting game. I don't think it is on par with Midway's previous games, like Jam, obviously, like Hang Time, like Showtime, NBA on NBC. It's not on the level of an NBA Jam or NBA Street. Still an interesting game, though. A fun game. And, yeah, that's got a pretty good soundtrack.
NBA Ballers, the original, is the best one.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Hands down, by far. And how about those cyber faces in that game?
Incredible. Yeah.
Like the Jermaine O'Neal, I believe the Jason Richardson, the Stephon Marbury, they look absolutely amazing for the time. And sure, they're not fully animated. They're slightly animated, but they're not fully animated like the faces in, the newest basketball video games, whether it was NBA Live 19 or NBA 2K24. But man, those faces just look outstanding. The original NBA Ballers had a ton of legends and that unlock system where you could, you had to unlock them, and that was fun to play through. It had amazing graphics, awesome gameplay. It was very unique in the basketball video game space because it was a one-on-one basketball video game, and it had that really close-up camera view of the action. I absolutely love the original NBA Ballers.
I think that's one of the problems with Chosen One, is that the game was originally designed to be that one-on-one, as you said. And one-on-one is still in Chosen One as well, and they've also got 2v2 and 1v1v1, and also a shootout mode, a three-point shootout mode as well, and another other mini-games as well as that. And that gives it some depth, which you definitely needed to have come the 7th generation. But the fact that it did start as a 1v1 game, the 2v2 doesn't feel as strong as their NBA Jam titles and their other successors to NBA Jam under different names, like a Hang Time, like Showtime, NBA on NBC, etc. But what about Hawks Rasheed Wallace being captured in the original NBA Ballers? What a specific time to lock the rosters.
He only played one game with them. He played one game with the Atlanta Hawks, had an awesome stat line, and he was out.
Yeah. Then onto Detroit. 10 days, one game in Atlanta. But during that time, they obviously finalized the rosters for the original NBA Ballers and made it in there. And you know me, Derek, you know I love trivia like that.
I mean, when you see stuff like that, it makes you want to write an article. I know you pretty well by now.
Yeah, I mean, I had to issue a correction, actually, because I did have the Friday five stints that never officially appeared in any video games. Somehow I overlooked NBA Ballers, because I looked at the release date of that, didn't even fire it up. Rookie mistake, I know. And thought, oh, there's no way that it's made it into that when it was released at this time. But nope, it certainly did make it in there, so I had to write a follow-up article it's part of the corrections that I posted back in January, 5 corrections to previous articles, part 2. And I'm sure that I'll mention it in future articles, for sure.
Well, you want to bring up familiar faces in strange places. How about Hubert Davis on that 01-02 Wizards team in NBA Live 2002? What a weird thing it is to bring him off the bench on that team. And the reason I thought of this, for our listeners, Andrew and I connected this morning on NBA Live 2002 for Xbox. And we used the Wizards, so Wizards MJ, versus Ray Allen's Bucks. So Ray Allen, Sam Cassell, Big Dog Glenn Robinson, etc. And we actually had a lot of fun, Andrew, in that game. But, one of my thoughts was while using that Wizards roster, with Chris Whitney and Rip Hamilton and Michael Jordan and Jahidi White and Kwame Brown.
Tyrone Nesby, the great Tyrone Nesby.
Tyrone Nesby and Courtney Alexander. There's nobody out there that could say that Michael Jordan tried to stack the deck on his return to get a cheap championship.
No.
Like, that team is absolutely terrible on paper. It says something about his greatness that he had them in the top 3 or 4 in the East at the All-Star break, primed for a playoff run before he hurt his knee. And, MJ was an MVP candidate at that point. They actually talked about it during the All-Star game and actually interviewed him about that piece during the All-Star game, I believe, as well. But that roster is absolutely terrible. We're just lucky that video games couldn't accurately capture how bad Kwame Brown was. And
what a beast.
To put up, I think, points and 8 rebounds with him in 6-minute quarters. And he had some nice, loud, two-handed jams where the basket shook like it does in that game. He's a little bit too fast, and he's a little bit too good at hook shots in that game as well. We won that game pretty handily, but man, I said to you on X when we were talking about it after the game, and I know this isn't going to make the Live 01 legends happy, but they definitely made some improvements from Live 2001. With Live 2002, the gameplay is a lot more reactive, like when you push a button and it happens on screen. They smoothed out a lot of the animations. The moves are not as heavy. The defense, playing defense is more rewarding. Yeah, I think I enjoy Live 2002 more than Live 2001, with the exception of Live 2002 not having a solid camera view, like a good camera view to play on.
Agreed. Before I get into Live 2002, you're absolutely right about MJ. It's one of those things where people look at the overall stat line on the season, which was also brought down when he was coming off the bench and playing very limited minutes in the 7 games he played after trying to come back from that knee injury later in the season. Pulled the averages right down. I think there was a game against the Lakers. He only played 12 minutes and scored 2 points. Very un-MJ-like, to say the least. And, as you say, he was that MVP candidate, bringing the Wizards right up into the top 3, top 4 in the East, and heading into the All-Star break, putting up familiar numbers. I think we covered that in a previous show, actually, when we were talking about some of the legends still putting up great numbers in their twilight years. But yeah, Live 2002, it was very controversial in our community, obviously, being a console-only release, founded as a PC modding site as we were. People weren't happy to see that being a console-only release. Some of us did have consoles, obviously. That is something over the years with our site, with the NLSC community. Much as I love what we do, much as I love our community, sometimes we have focused a bit too much on the PC version to the exclusion of the console versions, and that might also make console gamers feel a bit excluded as well. I feel we probably could have done a better job over the years of being welcoming to console gamers, letting everybody know that we're about basketball gaming, regardless of platform. But yeah, it was obviously controversial because of the lack of the PC release, and all these years later, we know that it's because the team was going through some changes. They were losing people from the NBA Live team. They made Live 2001 with a smaller team. It's also why Live 2001 PC came out in February, much later than any NBA Live, at least since NBA Live 95 PC, which was a mid-season release, obviously, and the 16-bit version was a pre-season release. So I do prefer Live 2002 to Live 2001. Lots of great memories with that game, with my Sacramento Kings franchise that I've talked about before in Way Back Wednesday. And I agree, there's just that looseness to it. You had a really great spin move on the drive with MJ when up for the jam. That just looked really good. I messaged you right after that happened. Just nice. Because that was a really nice move. And just some jab steps that you made, a couple of crossovers that we both made on drives. I think I had one backing down with Kwame Brown. The spin to the layup actually looked pretty good. You do have some of that problems with the transitional animations where you get stuck after a spin move or a crossover where it doesn't go immediately into the shot. There is that delay trying to trigger that animation and chain them together. But it is a little bit better than Live 2001 in that regard. There is that looseness there. And yeah, I really love Live 2002. Added some animations, like some of the pro hops before layups. They are automatic. They're part of the layup animation. But no, there's some really nice improvements over Live 2001.
Yeah, there was a nice layup that I was able to do with MJ going baseline, where he did that hop step and finished with a reverse layup on the opposite side of the rim. And man, that looked really good. The graphics improved in NBA Live 2002 over NBA Live 2001. They were a lot cleaner. They added new animations, as you said. And you know what the most surprising thing about that session was, Andrew? The fact that we grabbed a good amount of rebounds jumping for them.
Right? Yeah.
Is very rare. Normally jumping in NBA Live 2002 for the board means that you're almost guaranteed to lose it. But we were jumping in the paint with Leitner, White, a few times with Jordan, with Kwame Brown, and whatnot. And we were actually getting the rebound at the height of our jump. I think that's the most rebounds I've ever seen in that game, with, jumping for them. I thought that was kind of cool.
Actually skying for boards and grabbing them out of the air. Yeah, I mean, as rebounds are supposed to be, more often than not. Yeah, that was very satisfying. But it's so hard, is it not, to break that habit of jumping for rebounds, because that is such a basic part of basketball and basketball gaming, that it comes off the rim, comes off the board, you have to jump for it. Trying to train yourself to wait for it to land and scoop up the loose ball, you just can't do it.
You know what I really enjoy, Andrew, about going back and playing some of the classics? That even a game like NBA 2K16, by the way, so classics meaning, even in the mid-2010s, that when you get a steal and a block, it doesn't feel canned. It's not a canned animation, right? It's, any block that we had in that NBA Live 2002 game, we had to time our jump correctly, and we swatted the ball and we controlled that swat of the ball, right? It wasn't a canned grab. It wasn't them forcing the offensive player into our body and then us like stuffing it back into his face like unnaturally. It's just like a realistic feeling block. Like it's rewarding, right? And even steals that you get in, say, NBA Live 2002, you feel like none of them are canned. And that my brother and I have really been enjoying that aspect playing NBA 2K16, because we've been playing it a ton lately. And it's none of the steals and none of the blocks in that game feel canned. And when you get into like a passing lane and guess correctly and get that steal, it feels so natural and rewarding. You're not dragged into the steal. Like you did all the work. And it's just something that's so amazing about basketball video games of the past before they added all the canned animations.
It definitely is. I actually sent you a clip on X of my player in my NBA 2K14 My Career going for the interception, batting it up into the air, catching it, and running out for a off-the-board alley-oop. And that just felt so organic. And there are a lot of moments like that in 2K14, 15, 16, 17, as we've said before, that feel so good because they do feel so organic. It's not just a canned moment, as you said. And look, some games have made the canned moments work and the canned animations at least look good, but they never feel quite as good as the games that have managed to get some kind of realistic physics.
Exactly. I will say that the two funniest plays of the game, one, Jahidi White getting out on the fast break and losing all of his steam at about the free throw line and just kind of slogging his way to the hoop and finishing with a lame layup. He didn't have it, Andrew.
No.
He didn't have the steam, even for that one fast break. The other one was me messaging you on X after a great play that you made with Rip Hamilton where you pump faked, stepped in and hit a jumper. And I said, man, this game could look really good sometimes. And then right after I made that comment, you took another jumper on the next possession and it hit the top of the backboard and sailed out of bounds. And I thought that was kind of fitting because, that's just kind of the way it is with video games sometimes. Something can look really good 1 second and feel really good, and the next moment it's like, yeah, we're playing a video game.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is some realism to that sometimes a player can make a great play and then a tremendous blunder down the next time down the floor. But yeah, certainly with video games, it can be more of a crapshoot.
Seen in real life a player take a wide open 15-foot jump shot and it hit the top of the backboard.
Especially Rip Hamilton. Especially a player like Rip Hamilton, yeah.
That's like one of the best mid-range shooters of his era, Rip Hamilton, just right off the top of the backboard.
It was funny, though, that you messaged me that and said, oh, that looked really good, when I had that the pump fake and step in with him on the previous play, and then I bricked that shot, and you messaged me to say, oh, never mind. That was pretty funny. So I had a third one, actually, towards the end of the game, one of the last plays of the game, driving baseline with MJ, and Live 2001 and 2002, there is, if you're not using direct shoot, which you definitely should, I don't use it as much as I should in those games. If you don't use direct shoot, then sometimes the trigger zones for layups and dunks, it doesn't work particularly well. And it's very easy in those games to go into a runner when you want to trigger a layup or a dunk, a running dunk, running layup.
I started doing that one-handed runner.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so easy to do. And I did it towards the end of the game with MJ, overshot a little bit, and fired it right into the back of the backboard, caught my own miss on the violation, which wasn't called, and then went up for a dunk. As you said, just as I drew it up.
You always have one of those plays every game that we play.
Yeah.
Any session we have, Andrew has this wild play that works. Whether it's an accidental full court shot that goes off the backboard and then somehow he gets it back and throws it down, or it's something like that with MJ. You always have those wild plays.
Again, that's all part of basketball gaming, right?
Exactly.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, nba-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community.
So at the start of this NBA Live 2002 segment, I mentioned that it had poor camera view selections. I think that game doesn't have a adequate broadcast camera. It's still zoomed in even when you try to zoom it all the way out. Even the behind cameras are way too close to the action. You don't actually have a really good view of the court, and that is a big advantage for NBA Live 2001. And not only did NBA Live 2001 have a great broadcast camera angle, but it also had that NBA Live 95-esque isometric angle. Right, and I showed a highlight of that on X recently, but it got me thinking about camera angles. So I asked the community, outside of online play, what camera angle do you prefer? And I listed broadcast or isometric, like NBA Live 95-esque, or 2K cam / behind cam, or another camera view. And I know that you and I prefer broadcast for non-online play. And even if I was playing online, which I dabbled in with one of the past titles, I still put it on broadcast and whatnot. When I was playing my career and whatnot, I actually uploaded a video to my D for Free YouTube of me playing on broadcast. But yeah, what is your go-to for a broadcast camera angle? What do you do with the zoom? Do you just use the default? What do you do usually?
It depends on the game. If the default angle is a little bit too zoomed in, like a Live 2002, I will adjust the zoom accordingly. A lot of my favorite games, I feel that the default broadcast view is suitable for my needs. Like a Live 06, I just chuck it on to broadcast view. That was another game that defaulted to that baseline view, that EA cam, which is much like 2K cam. That look, I can play from that view, but I do have baseline views for my career and online as well. Whenever I'm player locked, I do actually prefer some kind of over the shoulder camera, if you will, behind the player. But normally I do opt for broadcast view when I'm not player locked. NBA Live 96 actually, despite having a wide variety of camera views for that time, that virtual stadium technology that they talked about, which was kind of more of a marketing gimmick than anything else. Rod Redekop mentioned that to me when I interviewed him. But it does have some great camera views in that game. I always used to play on Classic View back in the day, that isometric view similar to Live 95. That was my preferred view for Live 96 PC. Although these days I do go to the broadcast view a bit more in that game, but Classic View is just so nostalgic, so memorable for me in that era that I do have to play with it. But over the years, as they brought in other camera angles, more TV-style presentation, I did go to those broadcast cameras. Didn't really adjust the zoom, as I said, unless there was a problem with them, like a Live 2002. But I do change it up based on, based on my needs. Non-player lock gameplay, I want it to be that broadcast style. My career online, I will go usually with that baseline camera. Not one that rotates. I prefer one that always stays behind the player and just pans up and down the court. I think it's just my career default is the one that I go with in 2K14 and other games of that generation. But the exception is online with the playground and the smaller courts of 3v3 Pro-Am. I will actually put it on a broadcast view or a sideline view, whatever's available, because it is a smaller court, so it's a better view that way.
So, I love the isometric view.
Of course.
Old NBA Live games, from NBA 2K8, the crowd cam, etc. Like, I absolutely love that view of the action, and I can play on that camera view and just have an absolute blast. But, as I've said on many podcasts before, broadcast holds a special place for me because it's how we've experienced all of our real life NBA and college moments in our lives, right? We've watched the nationally televised games, our local teams games on the local network, etc. The playoffs on TNT, on ESPN, it's all on that broadcast cam. The great plays that you remember Jordan making in real life, how did you experience them? From the broadcast angle.
Exactly.
People who love Kobe, who love T-Mac, Vince Carter, Allen Iverson, Shaq, and then today's day and age, Anthony Edwards and Jason Tatum and Wembanyama and all that, and Steph Curry and LeBron. All of your experiences with basketball, watching those players play, are from that broadcast angle. So broadcast holds a special place for me. In a game like NBA 2K, over the years, that has that camera relative option for your controls, which has always made sense for me. I know that you use absolute because NBA Live always had absolute only, right, for the majority. But camera relative makes all of the controls make perfect sense for me. So I always put the pro stick orientation on offense and defense to camera relative, and I play on a broadcast camera angle that's, if it has the option, that's zoomed out so I can see, what I need to see for the action. And, I hit the court that way. And it's never let me down. It's the way both of my brothers love to play as well, whether we're playing on the same team against each other, player locked, etc. We don't have to worry about, the camera jumping around. like it does on some of the other views. We don't have to worry about the camera flipping. We don't have to worry about not knowing how close we are to the baseline, like on the behind camera.
Exactly.
Or how the defender is to us. Like we can see all the space between, the guy that's in front of us and whatnot, or, the guy behind us, etc. So I feel that there's more advantages to playing on broadcast, at least for me, from my experience and from my brother's experiences, than there is to playing from that behind camera view. I think that isometric is second place for me. So if I had to rank them, I would say broadcast is number 1, isometric number 2, and then the behind cam number 3. The only basketball video game that I played for an extensive period of time from the behind view, so from like the 2K view, was actually NBA Fast Break 98. And the reason why I mentioned that one is because it had other options. Like it has a side camera view, Andrew. It has an isometric option, etc. But for some reason back then, we never deviated from the behind high view or from the behind low view on NBA Fast Break 98. But yeah, for us, it's basically been broadcast whenever it's an option all the time.
I mean, broadcast gets a lot of flack these days, which is... I guess people do prefer playing from other angles. Again, I do play locked from a baseline-oriented angle, not one that spins. As I said, the one that will pan up and down and rotate with the player. Possibly because World League Basketball, NCAA Basketball, for Super Nintendo that you played, and I played World League Basketball, the PAL version with the fictional Global Basketball League, that was played from an over-the-shoulder rotating camera angle, and that worked really well in that game. An early...
But I want to point out, that's why I said that games with an option.
Oh, of course, right, of course, yeah.
NCAA basketball for Super NES and for you, World League Basketball, we didn't have an option to change that camera view. So we were forced to play on the behind view. But I will say, I loved that game, and that camera view works very well for that game.
Oh, for sure. I just mean that I guess that I was used to... I had played a game that where I had no option to play from that, except to play from that angle. So I guess I was, it was familiar to me because of that, is perhaps why I do enjoy that for player-locked gameplay. But yeah, I mean, I do play on Absolute, as you mentioned. I prefer the idea of the controls always relating to the player's hands rather than the camera. I mean, both of them make sense to me. It's whatever you prefer, right? Absolute works better. And as you said, NBA Live always went with Absolute, so that was what I was more used to. But that's also why I can change camera views without any problems, because I always know that left on the stick is left to the left hand, right to the right hand, up is forward, down is back. So that's...
Yeah, well, not to interrupt you again, but you've played with me on many NBA Live games, actually most NBA Live games, and I have no problems adjusting to Absolute.
Oh, of course, of course.
I can pull off all the same moves, etc. I'm just more comfortable with camera relative, but Absolute, I can still make that work. But I know from some people that we've talked to on the Discord, and actually this got brought up on the NLSC forums at one point. There was a thread about this. Some people have to do Absolute, right? So, I don't think that... I think that you and I are both really good at adjusting.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I do tend towards Absolute. I think I perform a little bit better with Absolute because I again, don't have to think about my relation on the floor. I'm just thinking about the player's hands and a standard control. But it's important to that point that games offer that option, and a lot of NBA Live games haven't, which has been their weakness and obviously conversely a strength in 2K. But yeah, people bash broadcast view, and I guess it tends to be mostly online gamers. And again, I do see the advantage of playing from baseline angles online, as I did. I have also played with the broadcast view as well and made that work. But it does really puzzle me because, as you said, Derek, this is how we watch real basketball, from a broadcast view. The idea of having the game reflect real life, from presentation to gameplay and player performance, is something that we always wanted to see. And I think that disconnect shows how there's a lot more people playing basketball games these days that aren't necessarily huge basketball fans.
Well, there's another piece of this too. The broadcast camera angle, even those who try to bash it, will always freely admit that the action always looks better in broadcast cam. Why does it look better? Because that's how you've seen the game your whole life, right? Watching the NBA your whole life, your biggest moments as a basketball fan were seeing it in a broadcast view. I found it funny on Operation Sports. There was a thread debating this. What do you use, broadcast or 2K cam, why and whatnot. And former Celtic, short-time Celtic, and former NBA player Walt Lemon Jr. was in the chat, and he put out a paragraph in there that said, "I use broadcast," and he said, "I've never felt like I was playing real basketball playing from the 2K view. Broadcast has always worked better for me, etc." But one of the arguments that people try to make is that playing from behind feels more like playing real basketball. And I have never, ever felt that, Andrew. And you know what? For those people, if that's how you want to play and that's the way you look at it, that's awesome, right? Like, play the way you want. Like, that is fantastic. But I've never played from that 2K view and felt like I was playing real basketball. Like, it's never felt more like real basketball to me than playing, say, on the broadcast view. It doesn't do it for me.
I like playing with that player-focused view in my career, not so much because I think it's realistic, because it's not. If I could play on the broadcast view a little bit more comfortably, which every so often I give it a try in my career, and I'll give it a try again in the future, I'm sure. But I like it because it focuses on the player sort of from a role-playing aspect, but certainly not a realism aspect, but certainly the idea of controlling a character, much like the third-person view in a Fallout game, Fallout 3 onwards, that is.
That's what by the way, that's like, it reminds me of like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, like that third-person view.
It's a video game view, absolutely, which I like for that respect and that role-playing aspect, and I do make it work from a basketball aspect as well, I'd like to think, but yeah, it's certainly not about real basketball or realistic presentation. I will say, as far as broadcast views, we are talking about the ones that do properly emulate a basketball broadcast, obviously, an NBA broadcast. I mentioned NBA Live 06. I am talking about the PC version, of course. Had a pretty good broadcast view. There's also some great mods that add some even more realistic views, some might say. But what about that broadcast view in the 360 version? There's a sideline view that is more like a broadcast, but what they call a broadcast view in the 360 version of Live 06, that's weird, with some weird cuts.
Yeah, I don't know why they called that broadcast. It literally starts off from like a 2K style behind view, right? And then it's zoomed out way past half court, like looking at the action from a distance, almost like from the opposite baseline. And then when you pass it to the corner on that view, so like think corner 3, all of a sudden the camera view gets incredibly close, like super close to like behind the player, super zoomed in so you can't see much on the court. Like, I'm not sure what they were thinking with that, with NBA Live 06 for the 360.
Yeah, that was very strange, but they did fix that in Live 07. Unfortunately, they broke everything else.
Yeah, unfortunately with NBA Live 07, when you put the game on a broadcast view and the players start, when you use turbo with a player and he starts running forward, it looks like a parachute is coming out of the back of his jersey. The running and the dribbling looks so stupid. I don't know. I can't be nice about it, Andrew.
No.
It looked so stupid in that game. They're like slapping the ball, running forward with like I said, it looks like a parachute coming out the back of their jersey, and it looks like a bunch of guys that don't know how to play basketball instead of NBA players. NBA Live 07 was just such a mess.
The awkward flight animation, the awkward takeoff animations, warping into the right spot in midair, and then just jamming the ball right into the side of the rim for the bricked dunk. Yeah, wonderful.
It's the worst AAA basketball video game ever made. Period. That's the way I look at it. I don't even think it's close.
ESPN NBA tonight?
No, NBA Live 07 is still worse.
Yeah,
it's still worse. It's still the worst animated, janky game that I've ever played for a AAA title.
When you consider the heights that NBA Live has reached from EA Sports, a studio, a publisher, developer that was all about making sports games and made some great basketball games at the height of the NBA Live series, Konami's made some pretty good basketball games, but also some rough ones as well.
No, absolutely. So, Andrew, we actually had quite a few responses to the camera angle question.
We did, and a lot of support for broadcast views, which was very heartening to see, obviously. Teddy Bear the Gamer says broadcast shares a great clip of an All-Star game with MJ doing a great spin, gather into the one-handed jam.
Now, look how good that looks with the footage he shared, and try to picture it in the 2K view and how much it would have ruined that highlight. It just wouldn't even have looked close to as good.
No. That resembles something you might have seen from MJ back in the day. And that looks like a mid-90s All-Star game there. Very cool to see. Big Perk, at SweetJones_OTF, of course, says, broadcast far as if I'm watching on TV. Used to use a lot of 2K back in the day. And yeah, I can relate to using the baseline angles in certain circumstances. And it was the default in a lot of games, interestingly, even after games started to have more broadcast-style presentation and really ape an NBA broadcast. But like he says, it's broadcast far because it resembles what we see on TV.
Right. Think about this. Double dribble. What's the camera angle? Broadcast, right? NBA Showdown. Bulls versus Blazers. Bulls versus Lakers. All in broadcast. That's the way basketball video games were being made even in the infancy of basketball video games, and that's because people wanted to play how they saw the action, how they viewed the NBA in college, etc. And I've received multiple highlights from Big Perk for the NLSC Top 10, and he's always playing on broadcast camera angles. And I also want to say he's probably a Charlotte Hornets fan because I've mostly received Charlotte Hornets highlights from him, including a dunk that I want to say was in the top 3 one week with Miles Bridges. So, he's good at the games, and I like the camera view he plays on.
Makes great use of that dunk meter, I have to say. Big Perk.
Absolutely.
Chuck LA92 also says broadcast all day. Stephen, the Live King, says broadcast zoom is my go-to, but I love the high cam and 2K cam with no rotation. Just got to play with the height and zoom numbers. Rotation makes me nauseous. I've even played my career with no rotations. Feels much better. And that's the other thing as well, that motion sickness that some people get. It's why some people can't play first-person shooters. And I've seen some people talk about having a possible first-person camera view in a basketball game, Derek. I don't think it would work out, outside of virtual reality that is, I don't think it would work out as well as people think, because just the constant spinning and head on the swivel would probably get very disorientating. If you do get motion sickness, it's probably going to trigger that. And you have to keep looking around to catch passes and see what's going on. I think it's a cool idea, but I don't think it would work out as well as some people think.
At that point, I just prefer real basketball, Andrew.
Sure.
Just get out there and play. In relation to the Live King, I want to say that he actually submitted a highlight that made it into the top 10 a few weeks back. And it was from that high cam with the auto flip turned off. And I want to say he was using Dennis Smith Jr. And he threw it down with him. And it looked really cool in that camera view. I have a weak spot for super zoomed out camera views, whether it be isometric, or it be like a super zoomed out broadcast view, because I think that sometimes, especially with older games, but sometimes the action looks even better when the players look smaller on the court and when you can't see as much that it is a video game, right? And that's why I say older titles. So some of the older titles with inferior graphics, they are a lot more appealing when you zoom out that action, right? And the players are smaller. You don't see as many of the details on the players when they're zoomed out. And I think it just looks really cool.
And he also mentions playing with the settings, which I know you like to do. And in some games is absolutely necessary because the default zoom is not quite right, either because of the realism factor or simply the view of the court is not ideal for gameplay.
Yeah, I wish every basketball video game had that setting that's in ESPN NBA Tonight, the field of view option. The ability to zoom out the entire view, basically as far as you want, in order to capture more of the full court. I would absolutely love if every game had that.
Nate Starshow, one of the Live 01 legends, who we have disrespected by talking about Live 2002 being better than Live 2001, says, broadcast...
Congrats to them, by the way. Congrats to them. They're almost up to 600 subscribers on their YouTube, Andrew. And when we were first talking to them and we first started watching their clips and getting to know them, that channel, I want to say they were around 30 subscribers, right? So to have that much growth over that small period of time and working their way up to 1,000, which means when they hit 1,000, they can, apply for monetization. Kudos to them. Just great stuff by them.
Absolutely. Doing a great job with the channel. Love the videos they put out. Love that they're doing the minimalist modding to change around some of the teams. I love to do that as well, Derek, creating those makeshift retro teams with the players that are in the game, changing it up a year. Don't have to do a full roster mod, just with the teams you want to play with. Very cool to see. And congrats to them on that growth. Does also say that, but 2K View is better for dribbling moves. And you might take an issue with that, Derek, because I've seen you make some fantastic moves, you and your brothers, on that broadcast view.
Yeah, I don't... See, that's the thing, though, is that's the beauty of video games. Play them the way you want.
For sure.
Right? Like, if that's best for him, and, if he wants to pull off a sweet move and he feels like he can do it better on that behind camera angle, then... yeah, he can do that and, send it to me so I can put it in the top 10. But yeah, I've never felt that the dribbling moves felt better on the behind view. I never felt like they felt more realistic, or anything like that. But yeah, play the way you want.
Still trying to get a moment in 2K14 my career where I drop someone with the ankle breaker and then jump over them for the dunk. That's the highlight I'm going for, Derek, to try and send to you for the top 10.
Well, how about that Thanasis Antetokounmpo sham god that he pulled off in the last Milwaukee Bucks game, and then he ended up scoring on that possession? What the hell?
Yeah.
I did not expect that out of him.
Next up we have Studio33 says, this angle, LOL, referring to your example, which was a broadcast view, and then says, I will say, Run and Gun on the arcade, for whatever reason, had a very fun chase angle. It was a fun game, yet very annoying at the same time. And yeah, Konami does have that panning view up and down, which again is, I guess, why I like that for my career as well. Those games were a lot of fun. But Slam and Jam, as we played a few weeks back, that did have a problem being a bit too zoomed in, not focusing on the action well enough. So you can definitely do that angle badly.
Yeah, I think that when the gameplay is solid and they force you to play on that, like a camera view that you wouldn't normally choose, you can adjust, right? Because you like the game and the gameplay is good enough. And I think Run and Gun is one of those examples. Another example is the one that you mentioned earlier, like NCAA basketball, right? And then, when I was playing NBA Live 96 for Sega Genesis, growing up, we couldn't change to a broadcast angle. That is the only camera angle in that game is the isometric view, right? So that's something at the time that I wasn't used to as a basketball gamer. So I had to adjust to that. And because the game forced me to adjust to that, I started to, really like it and whatnot. And now I use it in other video games. So, I think as long as the gameplay is good, you can adjust.
Bucky T says, D, in terms of basketball gaming, it's broadcast for me all day. I grew up on it. But when I played the first NBA 2K for Dreamcast as a kid versus other humans, I did use the 2K camera, but that was the only exception for me. And, that's another point, Derek, that sometimes when you're playing with other people, you end up making compromises on preferences and settings.
Yeah, I also think that with NBA 2K, that camera view became trendy, right? It was kind of new in the basketball space as far as like a primary camera angle. And I think that that's why it's still so popular today, right? There's a lot of history behind that 2K cam. And, his usage of that with NBA 2K reminds me of my use of it with NBA Fast Break 98, which was technically really the first 2K because it was developed by Visual Concepts. So no, I think that's cool, actually.
And finally, J-23 says, I go back and forth with broadcast and side view. I like the side view, I just wish it was an actual true side view, like old school 2K. And, I haven't played as many of the earlier 2K games as you have, but going back to Live 96 PC again, they had that broadcast view that was higher up, more like a TV broadcast, obviously. But then they also had that lower down side view, kind of like you were watching from the courtside seats. That's an interesting view as well.
Yeah, so the older 2Ks that didn't have like a really good broadcast view, I would either use side or press. And I think that scratched my itch for a broadcast style camera view. And I think that overall, that side and the press camera angles in those older 2Ks did the job. So I agree with him. I like those.
And just to finish up here with a discussion of isometric camera views, Derek, with the isometric angles in Live 95, Live 96, the classic camera as it was, because it harkened back to Live 95 in Live 96, but they were stationary, they were fixed at that angle. We have seen other games like NBA Action, I want to say 94, and also Live 16. NBA Live 16 actually brought it back as well, that kind of that isometric view that rotates. It keeps that angle, but it rotates depending on who has possession, which way the ball is going. How do you feel about that?
I think any game that has a isometric view should have an option to turn off the flip.
Agreed.
The auto flip and whatnot. Because I hate when the court flips. I hate that pause in the action. I think that it's distracting. And it's one of the things I like about the broadcast camera view, right? Because we never have to worry about the court flipping or anything like that. So, I just think that, if they're going to bring an isometric camera angle into a video game, it should have a flip option, and it also should have the appropriate zoom and height options.
What about ones where it isn't a pause and flip, but it just smoothly rotates as you head the other way?
I'm not a fan of that either. That's distracting.
Fair enough.
It can hurt your ability as a playmaker to make a snap decision.
Well, if nothing else, it can be very disorientating. And if you do have that motion sickness, I imagine it would trigger that for some people.
You don't have motion sickness, though, do you?
I don't. No. I'm the one that can ride backwards on a train, be in a car trip for 8 hours, whatever. Yeah.
You can ride backwards on a train?
Oh yeah.
That's impressive. See, we're learning things about Andrew here on the NLSC podcast. Things I've never talked to him about before. That's excellent.
Yeah, I'll write an article about it, possibly. Perhaps not for Trains Weekly. Yeah, but thank you for all of those responses to that question. Really heartening, as I said, Derek, to see people enjoying and appreciating broadcast view as much as we do. And I know there are dozens of us. Actually, there are more than dozens, obviously, but we do see a lot of hatred, a lot of bashing for broadcast view from mostly online gamers, as I said, but it's just mind-boggling because, again, that is replicating basketball as we watch it.
Yeah, you know what I would love? If somebody in the modding community was able to get into the Xbox emulator, which is XEMU, or the PS2 emulator, and mod a camera view for NBA Live 2002 and give us a proper zoomed out broadcast camera. I would die for that. That would make me enjoy the game that much more.
Well, I have looked at the NBA Live 09 PS2 on PC. You can actually get to that camera file, so I'm wondering if you could, I guess, rip the game and then edit that file or mod a file in from the PC version and then recompile it as an ISO. Maybe? Worth a try.
I might bring it up on the Discord in the modding discussion section and see if anybody bites.
So thank you once again to everybody who responded to Derek's prompt, and that isn't the only interactive segment we have on this week's show. So Derek, let us open up the mailbag.
To the mailman, the pump fake. What an unbelievable dunk!
So Andrew, I asked this question to the community in light of our discussion on last week's NLSC podcast related to the BS microtransaction mechanics that are in NBA 2K24, the fact that they got sued over those mechanics multiple times over the last couple years, and one of those cases, as far as I'm aware, is still in court. I asked the community, pretend you are the CEO of a new AAA basketball video game and that you have the NBA license. And I stated, without microtransactions or DLC, do you believe you could be profitable? How would your career mode work? And how would your online gaming upgrade system work? And before we throw it over to the community, my take on this is that basketball video games were profitable, at least NBA 2K and NBA Live, when they were making strong basketball video games, with depth and whatnot. They were profitable before microtransactions existed, right? There was never a need to put microtransactions in these games or DLC or, different versions of the game that were more expensive, etc. So I don't believe that microtransactions are necessary. I don't believe that DLC is necessary. I think that the old system where you promote your game properly, you make a great video game that people love to play. In this day and age, obviously, having the game online is key and whatnot, having a fair upgrade system and whatnot. I think that you can still be profitable as a company. And, we talked about it before, even though microtransactions were in games like NBA 2K17, NBA 2K16, and whatnot, they weren't overpowering. They weren't overbearing. People still felt like they could have fun with those games without spending over the top of the base game. Even those games that did have microtransactions that weren't pushy or predatory, those people were still loving the games and they felt like the games were still being fair to them. The key here is the over-the-top BS with them, right? The game being flooded with gambling mechanics, them intentionally making the game a super grind in order to pressure people into these, putting more money into these games. So my thing is that you don't need them to be profitable. Or if you do implement them into the games like they were in NBA 2K17, NBA 2K16, etc., that you can implement them where it's not pressuring the consumer to have to put all of this extra money into the game, and they can be in there without ruining that person's experience.
Well, you say in posing the question, pretend you are the CEO of a new AAA basketball video game, and if I'm putting myself in the mind of a heartless sociopath, as a CEO is, then I'm just saying that we can't have as much profits as we can without microtransactions and DLC. And that is the thing, is that those games were profitable before that, I'm sure, but not as profitable as recurrent revenue mechanics have proven to be. And that is the problem. The Pandora's box has been opened on this. But to answer the question less cynically, I guess, without microtransactions or DLC, do you believe you could be profitable? And I think history says that yes, if you sell 10, 50 million copies, you are probably going to make you're going to make that money back. Obviously, you are going to make bank on that game still. And we've seen that a career mode can definitely work. People talk about the need to pay to skip the grind, etc., which again is just proving that the game is been designed to be less fun if you don't pump more money into it. Career modes worked fine before microtransactions. NBA 2K13 brought in VC. It wasn't in the PC version because the PC version wasn't tied to a specific platform at the time. There was still that disc version, obviously. And actually 2K14, with that DVD-ROM version, also wasn't tied to a specific digital platform. Thus, they didn't bring VC in on PC until 2K15. But those career modes work fine. So you can definitely design my career as it was back in the day. And I think a very fair way of doing this, Derek, would be to have my career both online and offline. That you can choose an offline save with the warning that you cannot take this avatar online, because the starting ratings for that offline my career would be a little bit fairer. It would be about making... I think there'd be less restrictions on the offline build so that you can make this overpowered superstar and just dominate the league and fulfill those NBA fantasies if you wish, if you prefer, where the online is a bit more restricted because you need that balance for the competitive scene. And as far as the competitive scene, you ask how would your online gaming upgrade system work. You do need to have that fair progress. You need to have proper starting ratings. And if I was running things and not a heartless sociopathic CEO, I would say have the starting ratings allow everybody to be competitive. Now, you can still grind up your player to 99 overall, at which point you are going to be a very powerful avatar and very difficult to contend with, but everybody should have, at the very beginning, ratings that at least make you seem like you belong in the NBA, at least allow you to compete. And also, get rid of those boosts, because they do nothing for the supposed skill gap.
Also, let's be fair here. One of the reasons why Andrew and I have this strong stance against, microtransactions if we were a CEO is because we want to be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Right? I got to be honest with you. I don't know how that CEO sleeps at night, probably comfortably on his incredibly expensive bed, his mansion, and whatnot. But
on top of a pile of money, yeah, absolutely.
How do you sleep at night?
On top of a pile of money with many beautiful ladies.
Just asking. Yeesh.
Yeah, he might sleep on a pile of money, Andrew. You never know. He could probably at this point. All microtransaction money too, right?
Yeah.
It's like swimming. His swimming pool is filled.
The Scrooge McDuck, back in the day.
Yeah, he eats money. Like it's his 3 meals a day. He eats his money. He no shame whatsoever. No, I would need to be able to sleep at night, and that's why this microtransaction BS. One of the reasons why it bothers me so much is I could just never picture myself doing this to people.
It does speak to the character of those kinds of business people, I think, that they are looking at ways to just look at people as dollar signs, not even looking at people as people or as consumers, as customers, as people to provide a good product for, but as wallets, as ATMs.
Yeah, and let's not forget, I keep mentioning this, but it's a very key point. Who's the target audience, Andrew? Our youth, kids, young adults. It's kind of predatory mechanics, attacking kids and teenagers and our youth. So, it's a touchy subject.
Not to get back into the whole fictions argument, the VC are fictions or fictional that they're defending, that IGN reported on. If they're going to say that, then, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but I'd be making the argument that they're trying to enter into an agreement with minors. That seems like an angle to take against them.
Yeah, I have a lot of ways that I would attack this as, the person representing the plaintiff in that family and whatnot. But, unfortunately, I won't be in that courtroom and I won't be able to bring those arguments to the table. But, yeah, there are many different ways I would attack that stance.
So let's see how our community would approach it. Nate Starshow, once again, one of the Live 1 legends, says, I would release one game and allow people to mod the game like how people did with GTA 5. Mod rosters, seasons, teams, etc. If the gameplay is solid, it could catch on.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to get more people into the game that way, right? So that means more people are going to buy copies of that game. So, that's a strong stance as well. That's a good one.
Railhouse is going to make a YouTube video on this and send it to us. Looking forward to seeing his further thoughts on that. Sim Gaming Network says, question, how did it work and the companies make profits from 94 to 2012? I'm okay with 2K having VC in the game, but I don't think it should be used to upgrade your player. Instead, it should be for cosmetics and emotes. And that's an argument that I often see, and I do see the merit in it, and I think it would be better than charging people to upgrade players or making it possible to charge gamers to upgrade their players. As I've said before, it's ridiculous to claim skill gap and at the same time have people pay their way to a better player. But there's also problems with cosmetics being tied to microtransactions as well, because people will want to get those cosmetics to identify themselves as quote-unquote serious online gamers and to actually get a game. We've seen how toxic it can be, Derek, for cosmetics in the playground, that if you don't have the right fit, people don't want to play with you. So I see the argument, and I do think that cosmetics would be better, just cosmetics and emotes would be better than upgrades, but there's still a problem there.
I think what he's trying to get at, like his general point, is that microtransactions can be in the game and be more fair to the gamer than what they are now. Like, sure. I think his general premise is that, kind of what I said earlier, with NBA 2K16, 17, and whatnot, that even though microtransactions were in the game, it wasn't something where there wasn't as much pressure on the gamer. The grind wasn't what it was in the new games, the intentional grind and whatnot. And your player wasn't just completely terrible without the purchase of more VC to upgrade and whatnot. So I think that's his general point, and I agree.
I mean, if you give enough virtual currency game to game, like in 2K17, that you can upgrade comfortably without being forced to consider buying VC, then yeah, that's the way to do it. Phil Lime 2K says more transparency and democracy where consumers have influence on how the game is made with the same modes like in 2K, and continues, important achievements in my career, my team in 1 year will matter even after the new game releases, as you get a bonus or badge for the next year, meaning playing long hours will be worth it, also for the next game. In theory, this guarantees more loyalty among customers. My team, straight up, let's have 99 overalls from day one, but great cards will be way more unique. Only young players should have Evos, cards must replicate players in real life, e.g. Artest's best card should be his 2004 version, like in 2K16.
Before we continue, I love that, because how much do we hate seeing people use Shaq at a 99 three-pointer and smoking threes?
The cartoonish cards, yeah.
Ridiculous. Like, it kind of ruins the tradition of the game and ruins the quality of that mode. If you're going to play a mode like my team and you're going to try to represent the history of the game, at least make the players, as close as you can to their real life counterpart on any version of the player, right? Like, and I like his idea of saying, hey, the best card is going to be the player, from their best year. So if you want to say that 05-06 was Kobe Bryant's best single season and whatnot, Kobe's best card would be based off of the 05-06 version of Kobe, and he would have ratings and attributes and badges and everything comparable to the way Kobe was in that season. So no, I love that point.
Absolutely makes sense, for sure. Also says for my team, very rare performance cards like Brewer with his 50-point game, along with dynamic duos like MJ Pippen, Malone Stockton, or brothers and fathers son duos. Shoe boosts are cool, current modes too, I assume. My career, no scripted storyline, needs to be unique careers with everyone's my career by having choice on press conferences, conversations, etc. You can start in high school, Europe, college, G League, and develop a unique personality and relationship to teammates, coaches, etc. Continues for my career, says it should be possible to play with your my player in offline modes like my NBA. With Park, do it like 2K16, and we are happy with the affiliations. Wild suggestion, what about countries as affiliations, like Affiliation USA, Canada, and many more? And finally says, for my career again, upgrading system would be, you have your attributes, badges, and personality that you can upgrade. You can only have the highest rating if you play my career games with your franchise and Park. Approximately 800 hours needed to get to 99. Too much. I do like most of those suggestions. I do think 800 hours is pushing it.
I think he said what his point is that 800 hours is too much. That's not.
Oh, okay. Yes, in that case, yeah, I absolutely agree. It should be a fairly long journey to get to 99. You shouldn't just be able to hit that in week one, because that's the argument that people make. Oh, you want to be 99 overall in week one. Nobody wants that. They want to have starting ratings that allow them to get online fairly quickly and not have to grind mindlessly and joylessly to be able to get online. And the road to 99 should not be, again, like he says, 800 hours. So no, I absolutely agree with that. I love the idea of having no scripted storyline, having a gameplay-driven narrative and a gameplay-driven direction to my career, having those different choices, having different starting points, each with their own benefits. Actually, the W does that already. They're doing that in 2K with the WNBA career mode. You can have the two starting options in 2K24, so this definitely is possible. And to that point, we don't have microtransactions in the W, so we know that it's not necessary for a career mode. But no, I love those suggestions for my team and my career.
Yeah, and I think that when the NBA 2K25 wish list comes out on the NLSC, that thread, I think that you should either copy and paste what you put on X there, or at least get those ideas out on the forum. And because I think that you have a lot of great ideas there. I definitely agree about the grind, about how it's too much, about how it's an intentional grind. It's supposed to make you want to put more money into the game in order to, get your overall higher and upgrade your player and whatnot. I love your ideas on my team, all of that stuff. So yeah, when that forum thread opens up get in there.
Definitely need to get onto that thread, actually. TechWorks says pretty much the same as NBA Live 18, but with actual good graphics and animations. And look, I actually quite like Live 18, dusting it off last year as I did, Derek, but yeah, there certainly are issues with the animations. Graphically, I think it's pretty good. There's some fantastic faces, actually, in Live 18, but no, there was definitely some more polish that game needed to really compete with 2K.
Yeah, I think that Live 18's graphics are actually superior to Live 19's. I think the lighting is a lot more appealing. The game feels more lively, etc. So I don't entirely agree with that point. What he said about the gameplay, I think my biggest issue with NBA Live 18's gameplay is how canned it feels. I think that NBA Live 18 and NBA Live 19 took a step back from Live 15 and Live 16 in that regard, where Live 15 and Live 16 have quite a few gameplay issues, which we talked about on prior shows, but the games do not feel canned. Like playing defense and offense on those two games, you still feel like you're controlling the action. I feel like oftentimes on Live 18 and Live 19, they moved in a direction of having far more two-man canned animations that, drives to the basket almost always feel canned in the Live 18 and Live 19. And I think that playing defense, like you can see that a canned block is going to happen 3 seconds before it happens, right?
Yeah.
You can see two players coming together and you know what animation is coming oftentimes. So I think that I think that's my biggest issue with Live 18's gameplay.
And of course, Live 18's career mode, the one, did have that separation into the league and the streets that you didn't have to, you could play one or the other, and it had a very minimal storyline, very minimalist storyline, I should say. And of course, it had no microtransactions for upgrading your player, or cosmetic items for that matter. In fact, you had separate currencies, points for in-game points for upgrading players and getting cosmetic items. With that being said, let's not fool ourselves. If Live were more competitive with 2K and selling as many copies and really competing with them, EA would definitely have had microtransactions.
Oh, absolutely. I without a doubt, I think that this is an industry thing, right? This isn't, I've said it before, this is not just a Take-Two thing. This is not just a 2K thing. This is something that's happening industry-wide, and even a lot of indie developers, like I mentioned, are going this route and filling their games with microtransactions. And EA Sports also with NBA Live Mobile and Madden Ultimate Team, they are not saints. They are absolutely piss poor in that regard.
Absolutely.
With NBA Live Mobile and Madden Ultimate Team. So, yeah, I think that just Take-Two has taken it to a whole new level of greed. And I think that's, why they're being taken to court, and not just once, but multiple times over the last few years. And it's nice to see more people speaking up.
And finally, the Cyber Athlete says, make it damn near fully customizable. From how many teams in your league, the ability to add expansion and relocation of teams, editing players, default details and attributes like MVP Baseball 05, customized draft classes, ability to download other creators, teams, and players. And that is very true, that if you provide that game that has everything that a gamer could want, or near enough to it, with deep modes, deep customization, lots of content, etc., then that game is going to be profitable.
NBA Live 19, you ran out of things to do, Andrew.
Yeah.
Same with Live 18, you didn't have roster sharing, right? You didn't have the legends in offline play. They were only in Ultimate Team. You ran out of things to do. There's certain depth that needs to be in a sports game in this day and age. And part of that depth is the ability to customize rosters, share rosters, edit players. And when I say edit players, I mean edit players in full. I don't mean just like change a rating here and there or just add a headband, right? Or add accessories.
Yeah.
You need to be able to customize. You need to be able to have a good create a player feature. You need to be able to, make it more of a community game, a sharing game. And Live 18 and Live 19, they failed miserably there.
So thank you once again to everybody who answered that question that Derek put out there. Yeah, I think a lot of us are on the same page, not just with Broadcast View, obviously, Derek. Yeah, I think people are fed up with microtransactions. There are people who sure for them, for whatever reason, to be contrarian, to think that they're going to get an in with the companies or whatever. But most people do recognize the problems with them. They recognize how they make game design weaker, how they make games less fun, and how they are predatory. So, yeah, it's nice to know that we're not just yelling into the wind, Eric.
That's true. And I also want to point out that I'm really thankful for the community for always responding to my community questions. We always get so many responses, whether it's related to camera angles, microtransactions, fun fantasy scenarios, questions to them, how would you make a game? How would, you handle this mode or this customization, etc. The community rocks, and you guys always come through.
Absolutely. And please keep that conversation going. With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again each and every week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, we'd also love it if you connect with us on social media. So, Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on YouTube, D43, and on the NLSC, D43.
I am Andrew Now Forum and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. On YouTube, we're NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep it locked to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.